Does anybody mind if I just do it without the slide deck and just talk to folks? Is that good with everybody?
Yeah.
Perfect.
If you run the slides, you still show up.
Oh, will it? Okay.
We'll start.
All right, so this is the Exploring Wisconsin Hacker History Talk, and we're going to kind of look at the events, the people, the inventions that kind of got us to where we're at today. So who am I? My name is Brad Swanson. I'm the incident response lead for Zendesk. We're a customer service software as a service company based out of San Francisco. I'm actually based out of the Madison office here. Got roughly 20 years in digital security. Most of it primarily as a good guy. Everybody had that youthful indiscretion, right? Started out when I was a young pup on an Osborne Executive 4. Anybody know? CPM. Had a thing. I found BBS at a young age and started doing courier work for groups like Frozen Crew, Fairlight, doing crack, stuff like that, which, because the phone bills after the first month, led to a recreational interest in the phone systems. My favorite thing is social engineering. Love social engineering. It's great. I've gotten cars out of people when I was, before I became a good guy, cars and money and various other things. When I grew up, I'd like to be a red teamer. So, anybody's, yeah. So, being at a hacker conference and talking about how we got here, how did we become, this hacking group, this community, if you will, we kind of have to look at what is a hacker. And my favorite definition of a hacker, there used to always be this back and forth, hackers versus crackers, and that guy broke into a system, so he's a cracker, and this guy made his VCR shoot lasers off the top when his favorite show was on. He's a hacker. My favorite definition is one by Peter Ludlow, who is a language philosopher. And Peter said that a hacker is someone who takes traditional technologies and mixes them up, gives them a new purpose. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. Some of the technology and some of the people that have done these things. So we're going to start with technology. It all starts kind of back 1868. We had a gentleman in Milwaukee named Peter Scholes. Peter invented the first commercially viable typewriter right in Milwaukee. Now, there were typewriters before that, but they weren't commercially viable. People didn't want to use them, or they weren't able to be marketed for whatever reason. Christopher's typewriter was marketable. People wanted it. People bought it. It was successful. He also was the individual that brought us the QWERTY keyboard. The QWERTY keyboard was designed, I don't know how many of you have used an old school typewriter, had like mechanical arms, right, that would go up and hit a ribbon, putting the characters on your paper. What happened is those arms would be close together, and you start typing, two arms would go up at once, they'd bind up. Now you gotta stop, you have to unbind your keys. Christopher said, that's really not a good way to do things. How can we lay these keys out a little bit better so we don't have this issue? And so he came up with the QWERTY keyboard layout, and it's just stuck. We don't have to worry about key binding anymore, but it's a convenient layout. Everybody's used to it. We also had a lot of genetics work that took place in Wisconsin initially. In 1910, a lot of people think genetics is a new thing, but in 1910, the UW over in Madison created the very first genetics department in the U.S. And they initially referred to it as the Department of Experimental Breeding, and it dealt with genetics of cattle. So you have this female cow, and she's a good milk producer. And you have a male cow, and he's got good genes. What happens if we take these two cows with good traits and breed them? You get a baby cow with good traits. And so they kind of looked into genetics as far as milk production, beef production, what makes a cow that has more meat on its bones than a scrawny cow. And they were able to do a lot of kind of early research. there were a lot of advancements in genetics in Wisconsin over the course of the years, and it's gotten us to where we are today. In fact, we have the biohacking village. I encourage everybody to stop by, check it out, talk to those folks. It's a great village to see. There is no experimental breeding at the biohacking village, so just want to get that out there right up front. I stopped by. I was a little nervous at first. They put me at ease. So then moving on, kind of technology-wise, radio. Early radio was kind of a big thing at the UW. In 1915, they had a radio station called 9XM. And 9XM, what they did is they talked to other universities in kind of the quad state area that they could reach with their signal. It was all in Morse code. They would talk about weather forecasts. You know, what's the weather doing in Iowa? Oh, tornadoes? Okay, we better get ready because they're probably headed this way. They talked about sports scores. You know, what was the score of the college game? In 1917, they took it one step further. So, okay, Morse code is cool, but not many people know Morse code. What if we could do regular audio? We'll just shoot regular audio out over the airwaves. And it was pretty cool stuff at the time. They found that people didn't like it. There were a few people that could receive these transmissions in their home, and they thought it was the stupidest thing. Now, who needs radio? Who wants to get these radio transmissions of audio in their house, playing music maybe, when I can walk over to my record player and just put a record on? Every time I say, by the way, everybody has to take a drink. It's a new con game. There you go. So they would broadcast this audio. Didn't really catch on quick. It took some time for folks to get used to that. They didn't have Swedish House Mafia back then, apparently. They actually got licensed by the FCC, a wonderful tax gathering organization. That gave them their official license to broadcast in 1922. And now the cool thing about 9XM is it's still on the air today. We now know it as WHA. It became WHA, but it's the same broadcasting license, it's the same group. Well, not the same people, obviously, but it's the same organization kind of. The UW kind of pushed through that. And it is actually the oldest radio station at this point in the entire United States, which is kind of cool, a little bit of bragging rights for Wisconsin there. So radio, that's cool. Where do we go from radio? We're going to fast forward a little bit. 1947, an individual named John Bardeen, who was from Wisconsin, and his partners at Bell Labs, Mr. Brattain and Mr. Shockley, invent the transistor. They come up with a working transistor. They take it to their boss and say, hey, look what we made. This is badass. Check it out. And that was on December 23rd. Merry Christmas, right? Here's a transistor. This really paved the way for the modern-day computer revolution. Transistors were the start of everything. It allows us to have telephones. We don't have to haul on a cart behind us because they're massive. Computers went from a room to a Raspberry Pi that you can hold in the palm of your hand. Transistors really kind of let us take off with things. Now, the interesting thing about John Bardeen is the guy was super smart. And transistors were not his first love. It was a project he worked on when he was at Bell, but it wasn't his thing. His thing was magnetics and superconductors. He thought superconductors were the cat's meow. And so in the 70s, he worked on some superconductor stuff that went into MRIs, and he won a Nobel Peace Prize not only for the transistor, he also won a Nobel Peace Prize for the MRI. So he's the only individual to have ever won 2 Nobel Peace Prizes in physics, and he's from Wisconsin, because we're cool like that. There was drama around the transistor. So I mentioned that he worked with a Mr. Brattain and a Mr. Shockley. Mr. Shockley would tell people, yeah, I invented the transistor. Whereas Brattain and Bardeen would say, hey, this group, we invented the transistor. Shockley got mad. Shockley said, I don't even like you guys anymore. I'm unfriending you guys on Facebook. And actually went on to invent more transistor technology and left these guys out, kind of cut them off from the projects. So kind of some early day 1940s drama for you. So yeah, John Bardeen, cool guy, invents a transistor. Well, so we have the transistor. That's a huge undertaking, but what good is a transistor unless we have a way to really use that a lot? 1958 comes along, and Jack St. Clair Kilby says, hey, let's miniaturize stuff. Let's make stuff smaller so we can fit more in. And so he invents the first integrated circuit. And it was kludgy. There's a picture on my slide if you guys can see, like, holy crap, that's kludgy. It was basically a chunk of silicon with a couple of components connected by a gold wire. And that's what, if you Google it, you'll see the picture, you'll be like, that worked. But it did, and it allowed Texas Instruments, we worked for at the time, to get a patent for miniaturized circuits. Jack was a Wisconsinite that kind of took this and ran with it. When he invented it, he was technically in Dallas, but we're going to take credit for him regardless. And so this allowed us to kind of take these things, the transistor and integrated circuits, and now these computers, again, are coming down. They're getting smaller. They're getting faster. A little bit of coincidence. This all happened right after Roswell. I'm not saying one way or the other, but... Oh, Roswell. I don't know how I'm doing that time here. Perfect. So let's talk about some people real quick. We had some pretty cool people, some pretty interesting people, and some pretty famous people from Wisconsin. Now, we talked about some of these people and their inventions, but these are people we're going to talk about that are more focused on the person, if you will. The first one's Larry Landweber. Is anybody familiar with Larry Landweber and his work? Anybody? Okay, so Larry Landweber was way ahead of his time. In 1977, he came up with an idea. He was a research scientist, and he said, boy, it'd be great if I could talk to my fellow research scientists at these other organizations without having to write a letter, put a stamp on it, put it in the mail. So he developed a thing called TheoryNet. And it was for theoretical computing scientists to be able to send this new thing called email or electronic mail back and forth. He had like 100 people on it, and it was a huge success. He said, wow, this is great. What if we could share more information than just these quick messages back and forth? So in 79, he takes it a step further. He invents a thing called CSNet. It was the Computer Science Network. And it was university, government, and industry research groups were able to get on this network and do things. It was kind of a precursor to the National Science Foundation's network. They had over 180 participants on this by 1984. And then the 1980s, he also helped to develop the first gateways between the U.S. and Europe, Latin America, Asia. He said, we have this great technology, let's share it with the world. And then 87 and 92, he also worked on a National Science Foundation / DARPA joint venture on a gigabit testbed project, which was going to allow gigabit internet speeds. And that doesn't sound like much to us now. We've got the phone, we call it TDS, we say, give me gigabit fiber into my home, and it's there 2 days later. But in 87, gigabit was fast. I mean, that was a big deal. Now, with Larry, one of the issues that we've seen are hackers are still finding and exploiting holes from the original CSNet days. So basically, this guy built the backbone of the internet, and it wasn't built for security. Everybody that was on that network was trusted. But now we take that backbone, we add unknown people into it. They're not all trusted. There's bad guys on it, and they're trying to exploit some of that kind of technology and the theory behind it, due to the fact that security was not at the forefront of everybody's mind in the 1970s. Larry is still around. He is a great guy. He was inducted into the Internet Hall of Fame in 2012, and he is still involved in projects right now. He is working on a project to make the Internet more secure. It's called Genie. It's the Global Environment for Network Innovations. And basically, it's a National Science Foundation project that says, hey, what's the internet going to look like 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now? What's the future look like? Where are we going? This is where we've come from. How do we take this down the road? Larry had a quote that is excellent. I really like this. And his quote was, "What I love most about this field is that no matter what you've done in the past, the future is always more exciting." Yeah, it just kind of gives you hope, lets you think, hey, what kind of neat stuff am I going to be doing on Monday? For me, I'll be going back to work. Yeah. Next, we come to a gentleman by the name of Daniel Plazek. Daniel, are you here tonight? Dan was going to try and make it. I guess he didn't. So Daniel created web forums called darkcode.com. And these forums were made with the purpose of bringing together malicious hackers and other criminals to trade malware back and forth. Daniel wound up selling some malware designed to harvest usernames and passwords out of network traffic to an undercover FBI agent in 2010. He was charged with a misdemeanor and was sentenced to 2 years probation. As a condition of that probation, he has to give free security talks to large companies, companies that might have websites that are white and blue and you can poke people on. He doesn't get compensated for these efforts. He simply gets airfare, hotel, and meals. But he has to go and teach them all the bad things he can do to their network. He started out, he got to start writing bot code for games. He wrote bots for online games. That was his thing. He learned how to code in high school, liked it, had a good teacher, a good mentor to him, wrote this code, said, hey, I'm good at this. This is something I can do. And then it kind of went a little bit downhill as he got into the kind of illegal code writing. Was introduced to the FBI agent by a third party, a friend of his that he'd done work with before. It's still unknown if this third party just didn't know that, hey, this is an FBI agent, or if that third party was in trouble and was like, well, I'll give you my friend Daniel if you cut my sentence down. Nobody really knows. Daniel only wrote code. He would test his code. He tested the FBI code. And the FBI code pulled millions of addresses per day. Worked great. But this information that he got, he never used. He never once used a credit card. He just wrote the code and got paid that way. The way they caught him, he was using a third-party service in the Caribbean to route all of his funds through, right? I'll have him pay the Caribbean, and then the Caribbean will route it to my bank account. When he set up the Caribbean, he used his real name. So, yeah, knock. And then finally, we have the 414s. Tim, are you in here? Tim? No. Okay. The 414s were a group of hackers that were active in the Milwaukee area back in the early 80s, 82, 83. This is before there were hacking laws. They broke into banks, into hospitals. They got into the Los Alamos Research Lab. They got into Sloan Kettering. And they just explored their adventures. They wanted to poke around and see how things worked. They got caught. They tried to cover their tracks. They wiped some log files at Sloan Kettering. Cost $1,500 for the damage. Knock, right? There are no laws to charge them with. They were famous. They were on the cover of Time magazine. They went in front of congressional committees to talk about, hey, this is what we do, this is how we do it, and this is how you should write the laws. So the Computer Crime and Abuse Act of 1986 was written in part by those guys. They were the ones that told Congress, hey, well, you should probably say some of this, maybe a little bit of that. Most of them were not charged. They were told, promise, solid, pinky swear with us, the government, that you will stop doing this. Oh, and give Sloan Kettering their $1,500 back. And that was it, restitution. 2 of them were charged with making harassing phone calls. Because what they need to do? How'd they get in? With a phone. Okay, let's charge them with phone line stuff. Real quick in closing, I just want to say that we need to pass the torch to those that come after us. Our history is very important. It's very important to remember where we came from and how we got to where we are today. The whole 1990s, he's leaked or he's not leaked, so I'm not even going to talk to. It's crap. Let's foster these people that are coming up through the ranks. When we're old and senile, they're going to be the ones that are doing what we're doing now. So let's make sure and train them right and get them that excitement that we felt when we were young and we discovered these things. None of us came out knowing this. They're not going to know. Let's help them out. I apologize for the technical difficulties. Any questions? Perfect. Thank you.